In Module 1, we've built the map, the product lifecycle as your operating system, the digital thread that connects it, and the way to expose where your own setup is broken. And I promise you that when you run that test, almost every deep tech company finds the same gap first: requirements and change control. So this module is where the map becomes real control. And it starts with the sentence that sounds obvious and is almost always ignored. Your requirements are not documentation. They're control system of your entire product. Get that one idea and everything downstream gets easier.
Digital transformation time. Digital transformation time.
Quick promise. If you're a founder, this episode changes how you read every requirement your team writes, from a box-ticking chore into the thing that decides whether you can certify and scale it all. If you're a tech lead, you'll get a concrete way to tell a real requirement from a wish, and why that distinction protects you when an auditor or a customer comes asking. I've built requirement and traceability systems for aviation and nuclear environments where a vague requirement isn't sloppy, it's dangerous. Let me show you why the framing matters this much. Here's how most growing companies treat requirements. Someone writes a document at the start of the project, a spec, a list of the product shall do X. Everyone reviews it once, nods, and then it goes stale. Engineering moves on, makes 100 decisions, the design evolves, and the requirement documents sits in a folder increasingly fictional. By the time you ship, the requirements describe a product you didn't actually build. That's treating requirements as a documentation, something you produce, file, and forget. And it feels harmless because nothing breaks immediately. The problem is what requirements are supposed to be doing while you ignore them. So let's reframe it properly. A control system is something that keeps reality matching intent. It senses what's actually happening, compares it to what should happen, and flags the gap. That is exactly what requirements are meant to do across your whole product. They are not the description at the start, they are the reference everything is measured against, the whole way through. They do three jobs. First, they define the target precisely enough to be testable. Not the drone should be reliable. That's a wish. You can't test it. But the drone shall complete 500 flight cycles without component failure. Now it's a target. The test for a real requirement is simple. Can you prove whether you met it? If not, it's not a requirement yet. Second, they anchor every downstream decision. Every design choice, every trade-off should trace back to a requirement that justifies it. When a requirement is the anchor, you can always answer why is the product like this. When it isn't, your product becomes a pile of decisions nobody can explain. Third, they generate evidence. In a regulated world, you don't just have to build the right thing, you have to prove you did. Requirements are what verification and validation test against. No clear requirement, no clear evidence. And no evidence means no certification, no matter how good the actual product is. This isn't a new insight. It's just one most companies skip. The foundational reference here is Gautel and Finkelstein, who decades ago defined what they called the requirements traceability problem. The difficulty of following the life of a requirement both forwards and backwards, from where it came from to everything it affects. They named it as a core problem in engineering long before it became a certification headache. What I'm adding is what it looks like when the problem walks into a fast-growing deep tech company that didn't plan for it. Let me make requirements as control concrete by showing what breaks when you treat them as documentation instead. Three failures I've seen again and again. 1. The untestable requirement. The system shall be user-friendly. It passes review because it sounds reasonable, then at validation two engineers disagree about whether it's met, and there is no way to settle it because it was never testable. You've built in an argument you can't win, right at the moment certification depends on it. 2. The orphan change. Someone improves the design genuinely better, but never links it back to the requirement it changes. Now your product is better than your requirements say, which sounds fine until an auditor finds the mismatch and asks which one is true. You can't answer. That's not a quality problem, it's a control problem. 3. The silent drift. No single change is dramatic, but over months the product and the requirements quietly diverge. Nobody decided to let them drift. That was just no control system catching the gap. And the day you discover it is always the worst possible day, during an audit, a due diligence, or a failure investigation. If you're a founder, here is your leverage point, and it costs you almost nothing except insistence. You don't need to write requirements yourself. You need to make one thing non-negotiable in your culture. That a requirement isn't done until it's testable and owned. That single standard held early prevents the untestable requirements, the orphan changes, and the silent drift before they compound. It's the difference between a product you can certify and a product you merely hope is right. And like everything in this course, it's not a tool you buy, it's a standard you decide to hold. So, requirements are your control system. They define the target, anchor decisions, and generate evidence. But a control system is only as good as what happens when something changes. And in a real engineering company, things change constantly. The moment a requirement or a design changes, you need a disciplined way to handle it, or all that traceability falls apart in a week. That's a change management. And there is a proven approach to doing it without drowning your team in bureaucracy. It's called CMII, and it's the next episode. I'll show you how to do the change control that's strict where it matters and light everywhere else. Recap. Requirements and documentation you file and forget. They're the control system that keeps your product matching your intent. They define a testable target, anchor every decision, and generate the evidence you need to certify. Treat them as paperwork, and you get untestable requirements, orphan changes, and silent drift discovered on the worst possible day. Treat them as control, and you stay certifiable by design. If this reframed how you see your own specs, subscribe. Next, I show you how to control change without the bureaucracy. And in the comments, be honest. How many of your current requirements could you actually prove you've met? That number is usually a wake-up call.
Digital transformation time. Digital transformation time.